Hello, and welcome to our podcast,
Sisters, Not Wives.
I'm your host, Kinsley Hatch.
And I'm Jocelyn Hatch.
In today's episode, we have some interesting things to discuss about now we are having a era shift with the Mormons and Brigham Young and all that. Last time we talked about how Brigham Young took over the church and Emma Smith and Brigham Young's conflict. And now we are moving to the point where the saints are moving west to Utah and all the different things that morph and change with that move. And there's some pretty crazy things, both just like historically, but also theologically, what happens to the religion once they're in Utah, isolated from everything else, and the need to have like power and authority and keep people alive really comes forth. So that's what we're going to be discussing in today's episode. So
Sweet.
Yep. Okay, so last time we talked about Emma Smith and Brigham Young. So Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith got killed in 1844, and then there was 3 years of Brigham Young like sorting things out still in the States. But what he was doing, he sent scouts out to try to find a new home for the Mormons, because at this point they had been kicked out of so many places. He was convinced that they really just needed to leave the U.S. entirely and find somewhere remote that people would not go like settle themselves. They could find that could sustain them and they could live their own religion and not be bothered.
How many states were around at that time? Do you know?
That's the thing. The U.S. was so different. The political and geographical landscape was so different back then. So it was basically we only had half of the U.S. that we have now. And so the most recent state was around this time was Texas, which there's a whole thing about that. But like everything west was unclaimed territory, basically. So it was kind of divided. Like
People were like in California though already, right? Like people were different places.
Yeah, so there was a scattering of people and people were exploring the West, but technically in 1847, there was actually a war going on with Mexico and America over a huge, like basically all of the Southwest. So like California, Nevada, what became California, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Arizona, like all, New Mexico. It was that huge tract of land and California, and that huge piece of land was just called the California Territory, even though it is way bigger than what California is today. So there was that part of the U.S. that was owned by Mexico. And then there was the Oregon Territory, which was like a lot of the upper part of the West that was owned by Britain. And so the political landscape back then, and then there was like the Alaska Territory that was owned by Russia. That was much bigger. So like half of the U.S.
I've never really even thought about this.
I know, isn't it crazy?
Yeah, that's super wild. I mean, like I knew that it was unsettled and people settled it and blah, 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 but I didn't think about like, yeah, it being owned by Russia and Britain and all that.
Yeah, it is really wild because back then it's so easy to look at it now and think of it in our perspectives and modern perspectives, but it was so much different than it was then as opposed to now. And there's a lot of people actually online who recently, with like all the political discussions with ICE and people like ICE deporting like South Americans from Utah, that's a hot topic, obviously. And a lot of people have been like doing the research and they're like, wait a second, when the Mormons came over into Utah, that was technically like Mexico. That was like territory owned by the Mexico government. And so kind of an interesting history there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because people will say like the U.S. stole that territory from Mexico. I don't think that's really historically accurate though, because what happened was, okay, so in 1844, the president of the U.S. who got elected was James Polk, and his whole platform that he ran on was Manifest Destiny. Have you ever heard of that before?
Yeah, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah. So what it meant, it was basically this idealistic way of looking at the U.S. where manifest destiny. Like basically the U.S. had a right and a duty to expand as much as possible and take up as much territories as they could. And on the bright side of it, it was because like, oh, we need to spread democracy and we need to spread the light of like our U.S. government and the rights it gives people and things like that. So, and that's why we need to expand and share this with the rest of as much of the land as we can, as much of the people as we can. But on the dark side, it was a very much expansionistic, like political strategy that really mirrored colonialism and was like, didn't give a crap about who was on that land. It's like, we're taking that land now. And James Polk very much had an attitude of like, oh yeah, we're going to fight everyone to get this land. Yeah. And so Britain ceded over the Oregon Territory, like all that upper western United States. Britain did not want to go to war with us. And so there was an arrangement made there. And then,
so I'm like, we've done this, so we don't want to do it again.
Yeah. I mean, 2 wars with you. So they were like, whatever. And then the Mexico territory. So Brigham Young and the first group of Mormons, they established like winter quarters, and then they make the 3-month trek, which is like 1,300 miles from the last like isolated part of the U.S., which is on like the Midwest was all that had been settled so far. And they 3-month trek to Utah. They left April 1847 and arrived July 24th, 1847. That's why that's Pioneer Day. So they arrived then 3 months, and they were like, yes, we have our like little paradise where it is a desert, but we can farm it and we can create our own world here where we're not going to be interfere, like the U.S. government can't get to us, like no one else is going to want to come settle here. This is our land, which was kind of their big vision of what they had always wanted, like their Zion. Right. And so they get there in July 1847, and it's in the midst of the Mexican-American War, where so James Polk, he was a very aggressive president when it came to getting land. So he basically sent a force into the Mexico territory, and a Mexican military force attacked that force for being in the territory. And then James Polk was like, they attacked us. And so then it started a war. People don't know about this war very well because it only lasted 2 years. So
only 2 years.
Yeah, not a big war, but it lasted from 1846 to 1848, and eventually led with the U.S. defeating Mexico, and they even occupied Mexico City. Wow. And then this treaty was formed where Mexico gave the territory to us.
They're like, just get out of Mexico City.
I know. They're like, whatever, man. Well, and honestly, like, California, there was obviously a lot of settlers, but a lot of the territory, the reason Mexico even had all that territory was because Mexico was originally occupied by the Spanish Empire. And so it was the Spanish explorers who were the first Europeans to go explore the U.S. Southwest. And so they had all that, the Spanish Empire had all that territory. And so, but Mexico declared their independence in 1821. And so once they declared their independence from the Spanish Empire, they took over that territory. So that's how they got it. But it wasn't like they had a ton of people there. And it's not like they had a ton of government or things there. So eventually they were just like, fine, take the territory. But obviously they wanted the territory. It was just a war over land, and the U.S. won. And so the U.S. took that territory. And so the Mormons arrive, and then literally not even a year later, that treaty is made and the U.S. gets all that land. And so they're like, we literally just walked 1,300 miles, and now the U.S. government is still going to be in our business.
Dang.
So
that would be very upsetting.
Yeah. So Brigham Young, I'm sure, was like, had a little panic attack. And then on top of that, so they arrived July 1847. In January of 1848, gold is discovered in California. And so now you have a ton of people who are not interested in going west, who are like, let's go west and get
JK, let's go there.
like, let's go make our fortune. It started the gold rush, which was thousands of people migrating who had no interest in the Western United States, who were suddenly like in droves going to California and places near California.
Like crossing through Utah.
Yeah, crossing through Utah. And people along the way are like, oh, maybe we, like, maybe we should start here, And so it created immediately these people, this like peculiar religious minority who is like, we left everyone. They're like, what? And obviously they like don't always play well with others. So the fact that now they're dealing with all these people and then the U.S. government still has control over them, like immediately there's problems in Utah.
Dang.
And so the Mormons are facing with their like idealistic paradise immediately being disrupted in those ways. And then also they're just living in a desert and have to like from the ground up create farms and build houses and find ways to survive. And it's hard. There's people who starve. There's people who don't make it. Even the trek itself, people die along the way. Not so much for the first trek with Brigham Young because they went during the summer, but in subsequent treks, people would go at times they shouldn't have gone during the year. And that's when the suffering happened. And so it was just a ton of strain put on their community. And so the interesting thing is it's interesting to watch how the theology changed and how Brigham Young decided to run things from a spiritual level to control what was happening both like with the physical and what was going on in there.
What the narrative was that lined up with everything.
Yes. And it is really interesting because Brigham Young and Joseph Smith were so different in that. And you really see it during this time because Brigham Young was a pretty good organizer of persons and he was pretty like crafty in a lot of how he organized people, and he had no problem taking charge. And but however, theologically, he created some theologies that are kind of wild. So that's what we're going to get into in theologies and kind of both the like spiritual implications and also the like temporal manifestations. Like why would he change the theology to be like this? So the first one is the Adam God doctrine. And the thing is, all of these theological doctrines we're going to talk about, even though they were instituted in the time, have since been like rejected by the church. And a lot of times before the internet, it was denied that these things were even preached because they're so interesting.
Weird.
Yeah. So obviously now they have to acknowledge it. But okay, so the Adam God doctrine is this idea that Adam, the first man on earth, is also God. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's, I mean, Mormons and Christians already kind of have that divide about the Trinity. Christians,
right.
A lot of Christians believe that the Trinity is one being, and Mormons are very distinct about it being three separate beings. And so Brigham Young, that was like from Joseph Smith's teachings. And Joseph Smith taught that like Adam was an archangel and helped create the world, and he was the first man, blah, blah, blah. But Brigham Young's like, and he's actually God, which is just, I mean, weird. Like, it doesn't really make any kind of sense.
Yeah.
Because it's like, wait, how could he be the all-knowing God and also the first mortal being on earth at the same time?
And if God's punishing Adam for taking the fruit, like... I'll have to set my mic.
For real.
You're like a Jekyll and Hyde situation.
I'm going to send an angel to stop you. I have all the power in the world. You know, it's
This is a slightly split personality.
Yeah.
Okay, so why?
Yes. So,
like, that was not what I was expecting.
I know, right? It seems like kind of harmless and also just bizarre.
Right.
Like, what's the point of preaching that and suddenly changing that? So first I'll read you some of the things he says so you get an idea for what it entailed. So this is from his one of the first recorded speeches that we still have, him talking about this Adam God doctrine. And by the way, even though he was the leader, people had a hard time swallowing this. A lot of members were like, "This makes me uncomfy." And like, if you remember Orson Pratt, the guy who had the whole fiasco with his wife Sarah Pratt, and with Joseph Smith or Bennett, John C. Bennett, he was an intellectual and he became a big writer for the church after this, and he was a member of the 12, and he was like pretty openly like, this is garbage. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Dang.
And it caused a ton.
Was he an apostle at the time or no?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah. After Joseph Smith's time, he like joined their group and became an apostle, and he was pretty outspoken at being like, yeah, that's not justified in the Bible, and I could easily disprove that. And Brigham Young got ticked, and he's like, don't you agree with me? And he's like, and so he basically almost got kicked out of the 12. He basically got threatened, like, if you don't like step in line and agree with the 12 and with the prophet about this Adam God theory, you're gonna get excommunicated and kicked out. And so eventually he like succumbed to that. But
It's unfortunate.
yeah, it is unfortunate, but that was kind of how things were run, like you don't question authority, which is pretty typical for a society where you're just trying to survive, but because they're out in the desert. But anyway, this is part of his speech. He says, this is Brigham Young, "Now hear it, O inhabitants of the earth, Jew and Gentile, saint and sinner. When our father Adam came into the Garden of Eden, he came into it with a celestial body and brought Eve, one of his wives, with him." So,
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. I see what you're doing.
yeah, so that's the thing. He's tying in polygamy with a lot of his, not only is he rewriting.
God's a polygamist too, guys.
Yes.
Duh.
It's not just me. If anything, I'm actually more holy because God is a polygamist. And so not only does he have to recreate the Mormon history narrative and what Joseph Smith did, but now he's going to the Bible. He's like, let me rewrite that.
Dude.
Yeah. So anyway, he continues. He talking about Adam. He helped to make and organize this world. He is Michael, the archangel, the ancient of days, about whom holy men have written and spoken. He is our Father and our God, and the only God with whom we have to do. Every man upon the earth, professing Christians or non-professing, must hear it and will know it sooner or later. So yeah, he has to throw in the one of many wives little spiel to recreate the literally the creation story of Christianity. So he throws that in there. But at the same time, he didn't need to say that Adam was God to throw that in there, but he does. And so, yeah, there's just a bunch of other quotes about how he...
What is this from?
This is from one of the first recorded... He may have been talking about it before, but this is the first, recorded speech we have of him preaching the Adam God doctrine to the saints in Utah, and it was in 1852, which is also when he first released the official revelation about polygamy to the world. So a lot of the religion was changing at this point or becoming more open. And yeah, do you have any thoughts?
I don't know. I was just thinking, obviously there's polygamy in the Bible, right? Like Abraham, Isaac, David, Solomon, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Why did you have to bring Adam into the mix? I guess just saying that Adam is God because he is the first and that God had wives. I don't know. It's
It's
interesting.
Necessary. Why more justification? It's like you had enough polygamy in the Bible if you're going to refer back to the Bible.
But I guess it's just saying that God is a polygamist himself is really the driving home.
Yes.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah, that definitely is what it seems like. But still kind of... And here's another thing that he kind of wraps in. It's kind of like when you're watching someone just go on a tangent and you're like, okay. Because he throws in this point and this becomes a thing that he brings up every time he's talking about the Adam God doctrine. He's very adamant that Jesus was literally conceived from Mary and God, and it wasn't the whole idea of immaculate conception.
God and Mary had sex?
Yes.
Jeez.
So, and he feels, he just kind of emphasizes that. So he says, he talks about how the earth was organized by 3 distinct characters, and blah, 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 blah. And then he says, Jesus, our elder brother, was begotten in the flesh by the same character that was in the Garden of Eden and who is our Father in heaven. Now let all who may hear these doctrines pause before they make light of them or treat them with indifference, for they will prove their salvation or their damnation. I have given you a few leading items upon this subject, but a great deal more remains to be told. So he's saying that God was of the flesh because he was Adam. So he was mortal.
So Adam just lived for forever and then impregnated Mary? Like, what?
I don't know. Like,
He's really old. I don't know.
yeah, I don't.
Ugh, I'm with these guys. I'm comfy by this whole thing.
It is. It's like why?
And even if you don't believe in, like, the regular theology, like, I'm not even sure how I feel about all that, like, Bible stuff and blah, blah, blah. I can tell you every story, but I don't know if I believe it's real or not. But, like, even if, I don't know. And even, like, the whole, I don't know. Yeah, uncomfy, too.
Yeah, it's super uncomfy. It's like, why? Why do you have to talk about this?
And then he's just like, I'm going to tell you this, and then I have some more. Mic drop. Bye. So he did that for a while.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, this is just getting weirder and weirder. And like, and I don't know if he was like, oh, Adam lived forever, but I don't think he was saying that like Adam lived forever and by the time he got to Mary, but he's somehow saying because he's Adam and he's mortal, he had the ability to conceive with Mary.
Right.
Like he had that mortal ability, but he was also God. So just weird,
Super weird.
Yeah.
Okay, continue, Brigham.
So that's a part of the Adam God doctrine. So the big question really is like, why? Why is it important for Adam to be God and God to be Adam? And the answer can be found from the research in the hierarchy that he set up in Utah to support him as the leader of the church and how he changed it and made it very much structurally a hierarchy with him at the top. And it seems like Brigham Young always needed justification for why he should be at the top. Like, I feel like Joseph Smith had this natural charisma and he like came out with the Book of Mormon and he came out with these things and people just kind of naturally followed him. And he had these like origin stories of the first vision and things like that and like God giving him these keys and stuff. But he didn't. So I guess you could say in those ways he was justifying why people should follow him. But Brigham Young seemed to really be caught up in this like, I have to justify why people should follow me.
Well, it sounds like, too, they had just come from a place where there was a lot of question about who should lead the church next.
Yes.
So
that's true. Yeah, that's true. So he had just had that experience. So he probably really wanted to solidify his place. And it is really common in a situation where you have a power struggle to be nervous about other people rising up to try to take your power. If you
for sure.
It's that. Yeah.
Especially like once you're settled and you've kind of like done all these things and lived your moment, people think it's time to kick you out.
I mean, it happens all the time with power. You see that all the time. And if for some reason it like reminds me of Hamlet, like there's that big like who should be in charge of power. I don't know, like kings and hierarchy and like inheritance of power, like it's all mixed in. And you see a lot of people who like it's just inescapable. People will make coups to try to take over governments, or like a son will try to take over. It happens all the time. So I think he did have that in the back of his mind, knowing he had won the power struggle, but knowing he wasn't necessarily safe.
Right.
And so he
and it's probably a way to be like, look, I'm the prophet, I'm receiving this revelation.
Yeah, he needed some like new material.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, I can't use all this old stuff that we had based off of Joseph Smith's teachings. I need to like produce some of my own stuff that we believe in now. And that's like,
he's like, yeah, this Adam God thing, that sounds original.
It literally feels like
an
idea that you think of like when you had one too many drinks.
Yeah, literally.
He's like,
part of me wonders if the first time he talked about this, if he was just winging it. Like,
he was just talking out his butt. He was like, dude, are people bite?
Yeah.
Yes. So he was Yeah, it does make me wonder because it's not.
And then he's like, I will come back when I've thought out the rest of the story.
To be continued once I figure it out. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. I don't really know how this all came to him, but he went with it, and he and kind of the reasoning behind it. The only reasoning I can see is he set up a hierarchy in the church that mirrored that idea. Just as God was both mortal, human, and celestial God, so was he as the leader of the church. And it seems like the evidence shows that he taught some of his most loyal followers that it wasn't just enough to follow the prophet, but that they needed to follow him because he was God. Which sounds very much like Egyptian pharaoh type stuff, you know? Like, I'm God and man.
He's saying that he's God and man?
Yes.
Okay.
Here's a quote from Heber C. Kimball, who was Brigham Young's best friend and who became his first counselor in the first presidency, and the man who was right below him. So he says, "Some have said that I am very presumptuous to say that Brother Brigham was my God and Savior. Brother Joseph was his God. The one that gave Joseph the keys of the kingdom was his God, which was Peter. Jesus Christ was his God, and the God and Father of Jesus Christ was Adam."
There's like a lineage of gods?
Yeah.
That are men.
Yes. So that's what he's saying. So like at the top is Adam/God. And then it goes down to Jesus, who was God and man. And then it goes down to Peter, who I guess was God and man too. And then Peter gave the keys to Joseph Smith. So Joseph Smith was Brigham Young's God, and then Brigham Young's my God.
That is so bizarre.
I know.
I have never heard this crap.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, yeah, the church, once they were like, nope, you know, because it's weird and doesn't make sense. And I honestly think Brigham Young didn't.
Yeah. Just like think of like the Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other and like, no, you're my God. Yeah. I don't know. That's so weird.
It's just, it is weird because it's like, why do you feel like you have to claim like deity or like divine?
Because that's the ultimate authority.
That's true. That's
obviously
true. And that is how Brigham Young ran Utah and how he structured Utah. He was the end all and he was the absolute authority, and you don't question him, both in the government, in society, in religion, everything. It was all interconnected with him. He was the leader for everything.
Dang.
And so
that's wild. Bro was off it.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if Heber C. Kimball thought Brigham Young was actually immortal, like
or,
God.
Yeah, or if it's like an expression.
Yeah. My thinking is I think it was more of an expression.
Yeah.
Like,
so but still, that's just a weird expression.
It is a weird expression, and it is on another level, you know? Like, I don't think they thought he was immortal, but I do think they took their, like, servitude and their loyalty to him to another level that transcended
like they served
their
him
own morality.
As if he was God.
Yes.
And by serving him, they are serving God.
Yeah, it's like one and the same for them, so they don't have to ever stop and think, like, should I be following this? It's just, like, built in, you know? So I think it was more to that than anything, but still that's a pretty powerful thing to be able to convince people of. So that was the first doctrine that both had a theological implication and had a like physical, in reality, government type of religious leadership authority type implication. Mm-hmm. So that's the Adam God doctrine. And it's been denounced as the church is wrong. They were just like, Brigham Young, you know, and so they do not go that. The next doctrine we're going to talk about goes hand in hand with the idea of authority and hierarchy. So as we talked about previously, there was a lot of, when Joseph Smith first revealed the sealing power, there was a lot of maybe like, because it was new, there wasn't set rules of what the sealing power meant, and there was a lot of like there also isn't a lot of records with Joseph Smith, like official records. It's a lot of people saying they were sealed to Joseph Smith or saying, but it doesn't really, that was one thing that Brigham Young did do. He was an organizer and establisher. And so we have a lot of records of sealings once Brigham Young took over. And that was one of the big things, like before they left Nauvoo, where he's like, we have to complete the temple and we have to get all these sealings and endowments done in the temple and record it. And so, but Joseph Smith, it was all new. It was a new revelation, and there isn't a lot of that. And that's why there's a lot of gaps when it comes to, like, is this just what people were saying, or is this like legitimately who Joseph Smith was sealing himself to? But anyway, so the sealing power was introduced, where the sealing power is where the idea that families can be together forever, which is a big like catch of the Mormon religion. It's something that people feel very strongly about because nowadays it's attached to the temple, and it's the idea of when people get married, a husband and a wife are able to use the sealing power from a specific like authority. Someone in the church who has the sealing power can, in the marriage ceremony, bind them not only for time but for eternity, and then families are connected in heaven and earth, and then all their children are, and you could also do temple work, so your ancestors are too. I know you already know what that is, but just in case there's anyone who's listening who doesn't really know how the Mormon church works. So that's a really powerful doctrine nowadays that people really hold dear and has everything to do with the temple. But back then, when Joseph Smith taught it, temples were so much different. Like, there was no temple recommends where you had to have interviews for your worthiness to be in the temple. There's no temple recommends. There was no garments that you had to wear in the temple. And they had regular church meetings and conferences in the temple.
It was kind of like anybody could go in there.
Yeah, it was like a sacred place, but it was more of a, it was just, the rules were entirely different than it is now, and how people think of the temple now. Brigham Young's the one who changed that and made temples specifically places for these ordinances for sealing, like endowments and things like that. And so he solidified that to make it more of a like solid structure. And then he also made sure it was rooted in the teachings of polygamy. So he connected the two. Before they were murdered in April of 1844, Hiram Smith, Joseph Smith's brother, gave a sermon explaining that eternal marriage, which is like the sealing of eternal marriage, was a beautiful and powerful ordinance between a man and a woman and made possible through the sealing power. He also emphasized that it 100% did not have anything to do, any connection. Eternal marriage did not have a direct connection to allowing men to marry multiple women. And it was actually just like a simple, easy doctrine. Like, eternal marriage is between a man and woman who want to be married together forever. And it does not have anything to do with polygamy. So this is a quote from that speech that Hiram gave. He said, "One reason I speak to the elders is in consequences of the thousands of reports from abroad. Almost every man runs to him to inquire if things are true, how many spiritual wives a man may have. I am authorized to tell you from henceforth that any man who comes in and tells any such fool doctrine to come in, to take away his license to preach. And none but a fool teaches such stuff. The devil himself is not such a fool. Every elder who teaches such stuff ought to have his nose wrung." Whatever that means. His
Nose ring?
nose ring. His name will be published, and if found guilty, his license shall be taken, his license to preach or be a missionary. When elders are sent to preach the gospel, they are not to preach anything but the gospel. I wish the elders of Israel to understand it is lawful for a man to marry a wife, but it is unlawful to have more. And God has not commanded anyone to have more. And if any of you dare to presume to do any such thing, it will spoil your fun, for you will never preach the gospel. I despise a man who teaches a pack of stuff that will disgrace himself so. For a man to go into the world and talk of this spiritual wife system, a man is as empty as an open sepulcher. If the coat suits anyone, let him put it into. I will call the... there's like some shorthand here that I can't read. Don't know what that means. The idea of marrying for eternity is the seal of the covenant, and it is easily easy to understand, and as to speaking of it, I can make all the world believe it, for it is noble and grand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Period.
Done. But also, as
That was Hiram?
Huh? Yeah, that was Hiram Smith.
Period. Hiram.
Yes. So he's basically, again, denying polygamy, and also
Very clearly
in no uncertain terms. And he points out, like, it's not connected. Eternal marriage does not mean polygamy. As a side note, this speech used to be in the Joseph Smith papers that were released by the church that you can access, and has since been removed from the Joseph Smith papers.
Why?
You tell me. I don't know. Yeah,
That's
so
weird. Suspicious.
Yeah. So Brigham's theology, he changed it. The new and everlasting covenant is what they started calling, like, eternal marriage.
I'm honestly surprised that the church held on to as many members as it did between, like, all these switches.
Like, between what eras?
Like, between Joseph Smith and Brigham Young.
I know.
Surprised it didn't, like, just kind of die off. Like, I feel like people would be like, you're saying one thing, he said another thing. Like, I don't know. It just feels like a lot of switch up.
Yeah, I know. It's like, okay, suddenly we now believe core different values.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting. It would be interesting if there was a way to study how many people did not join Brigham Young who were originally a part of the church.
Right.
Because obviously there was...
Probably didn't keep those records.
Those mysteriously are not available. Yeah, it would be interesting because I literally have no idea. Because that is... You think with your religion, people believe it so strongly. And those people believed it strongly enough to literally go into the wilderness and, like, give their whole lives to this and sacrifice everything and do so much and really believe it. It's like, yeah, how many of the people did that with all these switch ups? But also at the same time, I feel like this didn't happen until after they were already in Utah for like 5 years, you know?
Still, though, there would still be people around that were there from the beginning. Like, what's his name?
Orson? Yeah, Orson Pratt. No, I think most of those people were there from the beginning. But I think what I mean by that is, like, you've already given, it's almost like sunk cost. Like, you've already given 5 years of your life to this.
That's what I was going to say. I wonder how many people were just like, okay, but we're here. So.
Right. It's not that big a deal, whatever, you know, because there are, like, responses, like, people did not really believe it. But, you know, like, it didn't really seem to affect their lives. So they were just like, I'm sure, you know.
Maybe that was part. Probably not intentional, but yeah, I feel like had they just been, like, still close to civilization and other people, maybe there would have been a lot more people that left.
Yes, that's the other thing I was going to say too, like,
because, like, what are they going to do? Be afraid for their lives and go back? Or, like,
right,
like, what options do you have at that point?
Like, they were in Utah, and in Utah, people weren't making money, you know? It's like you were just barely trying to survive. You had, like, sold everything you could and spent everything you had to make it to Utah, and now you're just trying to survive. So I think when these changes came, it was just kind of something like, well, it's not like a ton of people had the means to leave Utah, both just, like, from a financial perspective and also from okay, we're going to make the 1,300-mile trek back because we don't like what Brigham Young is saying.
And for what? Now that we have nothing?
Right. Yeah. So I think that's also an interesting aspect of going out to Utah and isolating, is, like, you can have real control once you put someone in a situation where they can't leave.
That's part of a cult.
Yes, 100%. And there's even a story, and we can get into the details of it later, but there comes a point where Brigham Young gives a speech and he's like, I'm sick of all the women whining about polygamy. If you can't do it and like it, then leave. And he's like, and I mean it, and I offer this to all my wives. If you really want to leave, I will give you, like, a certain amount of time. I can't remember if it was like 2 weeks or a month or whatever it was. He's like, you have that time to decide what you want. And by the end of that time, you can either decide if you want to leave, I will let you leave, or you're going to shut up and be, like, grateful for being here. So he, like, gave this public speech to the women, and he literally said, he's like, I'm sick of the whining of these women. But it's like, I'm pretty sure that speech was given in October. Like, these women are not going to go out in the wilderness in winter and leave just because you don't like that they're whining, you know, like it's like the appearance of consent when there actually is no consent, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like that one thing that bothers me about the temple nowadays is I feel like that same mentality, and I feel like it stems from this. It stems from Brigham Young. It stems from what he put into place during polygamy, and it stems from just polygamy practices in general. Mm-hmm. The idea that there's consent, the appearance of consent when there really isn't consent, because that allowed Brigham Young to feel good about himself and to feel like, hey,
I gave them the option.
Yeah, I gave them the option. I am not a dictator. They could do whatever they want. They just chose to stay here. Mm-hmm. And so because they're choosing to stay here, I can now tell them how to act. Like, the thing I don't like about that is it's still in, like, how the revelation of polygamy was, where it's like you need the first wife's consent in order to take on more wives. But then verses later it says, but if she unrighteously doesn't consent, then you can just ignore that and take as many wives as you want. So it's so easy to play the system and be like, oh, well, my wife is not, like, righteously consenting, you know, like, she's wicked. And so, you know, there's a loophole around the consent, but it seems like it's all consensual and that it's really noble because there is this, like, law of Sarah of, like, the first wife has to give her permission or whatever. And in the temple nowadays, that's what I don't like, where they're like, and I don't know the exact phrasing, but they basically ask you, like, okay, anyone who, like, feels like you can't handle this or whatever, this is the opportunity. I know in the temple, before they go through the ordinances, they're like, okay, this is your opportunity to leave if you want to, before agreeing to all this. But you don't know what you're agreeing to yet. And so they do give that opportunity, but I just think it's interesting they give that opportunity before they tell you any of the details of the ordinances.
Right, you don't sign a contract until you read the contract.
Yeah. And so
it's kind of messed up.
It is. And it's like, and I think the justification is like, well, we don't want to share these sacred ordinances with you and then have you be responsible for this, like, sacred knowledge. If you deny it, that's bad for you spiritually. But from a logical perspective, it's like, that's not true consent if you consent to something that you don't know what it is.
Right.
And so,
and it's that whole, what's the word that I'm looking for? Facade that it is consensual or that you do have a choice.
Yeah, it's like very deceptive and very damaging to have those kind of practices in a society. But I mean, you can see the patterns of where this started, and it was with Brigham Young and with, like, the polygamy era. So what?
I mean, like, people leave the church after going through the temple.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. It would just be better to,
yeah, just let people know what they're getting themselves into so they can fully commit or not, you know. You're not like, that doesn't help, you know.
Yeah.
You're not stopping anyone from leading by not telling,
or from exposing whatever in the temple.
Yeah.
Like, people have done it quite often.
Yes, all the time, actually. So, and I think that's one of the things that bothers people is they feel like they were, like, not told the full truth until they were already in it, and then there is a lot of pressure to continue, you know. So
you can't just, like, walk out of the temple.
I mean, I'm sure you could at any time, but I think it's more like they're like
opportunity, like the spoken given word of, like,
it's like more like you would have to boldly stand up and be like, I'm leaving in the middle of the ritual.
More uncomfortable.
Yes.
Ugh. I'm sure people have done that. I'm just curious. Okay, rabbit hole. Anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have never really heard of any stories of people doing that. I've heard of lots of people who wanted to do that and felt like doing that, but felt like it was such, like, a crazy experience and they weren't quite sure what was happening. And this is usually like previous Mormons telling their story after they already left the church, where they're like, this is how I felt in the temple, but I just questioned myself and then later I realized,
something's wrong with me.
Yeah. So I've never heard of it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some people who did walk out, but that's mostly the stories I hear.
Sorry, that's a total side tangent.
Yeah, no, but I liked it. I think it was a good tangent. And so Brigham Young changed the sealing power to meet the new and everlasting covenant became polygamous marriage. That was for eternity. And another interesting thing that he did in the community is he used the sealing power to have men in the community sealed to him as his adopted sons. It was called the law of adoption. And even men who were close... Huh?
So already don't like that.
Yeah. So it was funny because these men were not like super young and like, oh, I need to adopt these people. There were men who were around his same age who he adopted. And
like, daddy?
Huh?
They're like, daddy?
For real. Dude, I've read the book written by John D. Lee, who was one of the men who was sealed to him. And he literally calls him father and talks about it like this.
There's another way to establish his supreme authority.
Yes, 100%. And to guarantee it's like the role of the father and son in authority and loyalty. And so we have no records indicating that, there's been claims that Joseph Smith did that with other people, but we don't have any we don't have any records claiming or proving that Joseph Smith practiced this law of adoption with other men. But all evidence points to that Brigham Young started it, and we do have records that he was sealed to 38 different men when he was in Utah. And so the thing that I find really, really interesting is the big justification for polygamy was with women. It was like, oh, well, in order for your salvation, you need to be sealed to a worthy priesthood holder. So that's why you have to get married and enter polygamy and have polygamous marriages, because it's so important for your salvation that you're connected to a worthy priesthood holder who basically will be able to get you into heaven, But with these situations, it's like, okay, you sealed yourself to Brigham Young for some kind of, I'm sure, some kind of afterlife advantage that you thought you were getting by being sealed to the prophet, but it obviously had no marriage relationship tied to it. And so it's like, why couldn't these women who needed a worthy priesthood holder or whatever to be sealed to in order to make it to heaven, why did they have to be married to them actually? Why couldn't they just be sealed and then just go about their lives?
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It doesn't. It just seems like kind of religious manipulation to be able to have a lot of women, honestly. So again, we see a shift in the theology with the sealing power. Suddenly there's this whole new element of it where he's creating this league of special men who are loyal to him because they're his.
Oh, are we getting into something that I feel like we've talked about before?
Like what?
About his little group.
I don't know.
Okay, never mind.
Maybe.
What do you tell me? He had this little
the
secret. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Jeez Louise, make me feel stupid over here.
Sorry.
I'm gonna tell you about that.
I'm like, I've never heard of that before. What? Yeah, no. But yes.
Okay, that's what we're getting into a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'm not stupid.
No. I was just confused. But yeah, so we're seeing this pattern in the theology changing and these weird suddenly magical additions to the religion. It all
But I feel like Mormonism as a whole is already kind of different.
Yes.
Adding on, you're just making it weirder and weirder.
Yes. Yeah. And it's also yeah, it is getting weirder and weirder, but we do see that pattern of okay, they're going through harsh elements. They're having a lot of outside forces putting pressure on them. They're having all these things. And so there's this need for authority and control and hierarchy and structure to society so things don't implode, I think that's why we were seeing all these changes, is because Brigham Young was I need to control this. And there's so many things that could rip this all apart. So I'm going to he already has, his following is so religious that he they probably felt like they had to have religious justification to like cement the loyalty and cement the togetherness to get through it, you know?
Great leader or master manipulator?
Ooh. Yeah, that is the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the third doctrine that we're not going to have time to get into today, which I think is a good thing because I think it deserves its own episode, is blood atonement. So blood atonement, this is where a lot of the rumors of blood atonement came from, which do you want to describe what blood atonement is according to your understanding?
I mean, I don't totally know.
Yeah, well, it's basically...
I didn't hear about it until a few years ago.
Yeah, I didn't hear about it until The Banner of Heaven came out.
Yeah, that's when but it's like... I mean, it has something to do with sacrificing somebody, like, for something.
It's basically for, like, lying for the Lord became a really popular, like, saying.
Lying?
Like, lie, you're a liar. Like, you're lying for the Lord.
Oh.
Became a popular way of thinking about polygamy, where they would go to England and tell people, oh, we are not practicing polygamy. And then they would convert these people and take them to Utah and be like, yeah, we definitely do practice polygamy and you should be one of my wives.
They're like, what the heck?
Yes. But they justified it with this nightmare. Literally a nightmare. It feels like human trafficking.
It does.
Yes.
It is.
It is.
Let's just say what it is.
Yes, it straight up is. And so, but that idea of like lying for the Lord, like it's okay that I'm not telling the truth to these people because it's for the better good of what God wants.
I can't.
It is, and that's the thing that drives me crazy with polygamy and people who still believe that it was right and good and what was done for it was good, because that's what was done for it. That was like a center point, and people feeling good about justifying things that are clearly morally wrong for polygamy because they believed it was from God.
Yeah, that's wild. And like, I don't know. I feel like with polygamy too, I feel like I've heard like the Fanny Alger stuff before we ever got into any of this. I've heard Joseph Smith did this, that, and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really thought about or known much about like what happened after the saints got here and what was like actually going on.
Yeah.
And like you said, converting people and bringing them over, and this whole lying for God thing, and like just like the moral spiral downhill. Yeah. And the justification and the manipulation is crazy.
It is crazy. And we really see the fruition of what happens once, because when Joseph Smith was alive and when they were in the United States, a lot of it was like getting persecuted, running away, establishing, things got weird, getting kicked out again. But in Utah, suddenly they don't have to deal with that. And you see kind of the cultish behavior and the cultish structures that start to form and that moral spiral and how things actually play out when they're given free range.
Yeah. Do you feel like, because this is how I feel like I've known a little bit of church history, especially like the beginning Joseph Smith years, and then I know like after Joseph Smith gets murdered, and then I know that the saints came over here and they settled here and they built Salt Lake, and that kind of feels to me like it's like, and then that's the happy ending, and then we built here and now here we are.
Yes.
Like, does that kind of feel like...
Yes, that's exactly what it feels like to me. They really...
Is that like the church's kind of narrative? Is that... Or is that just like my own perception?
I think it's a lot of members' perceptions, and I think that's what's focused on a lot.
Yeah.
I think...
like I've heard little stories here and there about after they settled, but...
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Yeah, it's like the chronological events. They really focus on the beginning because that's the origin story, and like coming to Utah, that's a really big element. And then they do skip to like modern day.
Yeah.
I feel like that is very common, and I think it used to be like the other stuff was skimmed over and blurred out, and now with the internet and now with people being like with this and this and that, the church has to talk about all that stuff, but I still don't think it focuses on that for people growing up in the church or learning about the church.
Yeah. It's kind of like, think about this analogy. It almost feels like you're dating somebody new, and then you're dating for a while, and then they like find out about somebody that you used to date or you used to be with, and they're like, wait, this happened with that person? They're like, yeah, but like, I'm not with them anymore. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm here with you now.
Yeah. Let's focus on us. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. And I'm like so happy we're finally at this point of this discussion, because it was 50 years of polygamy in Utah.
Jeez Louise.
And so a lot happened, and you also see some transitions with the spiraling, like you were talking about, of you have the OG people and the OG women who started practicing polygamy, and they knew Joseph Smith and they were alive during that time. But then these people start to have children, and you start to have a generation of young men and young women who are born into a system of polygamy. And
they don't know any different.
Yeah, and born into a society where religion and government are one and the same. And so you start to see a lot of those things, and then what these older men are wanting. Like, I am so excited to tell the stories of these women and actually go into these events. Uh-huh. And that's what we're going to get into with blood atonement too. So blood atonement basically was an extension of the idea of lying for the Lord. You could, because you were doing something for God, it was okay to lie if it was for the church, for the better of the church, right? So the idea of blood atonement is that same thing, but to the extreme, saying that it's okay to be violent and kill if someone has committed an unpardonable, forgivable sin. You're actually giving them salvation by killing them.
Yeah, like giving them their consequence now.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah, by making that sacrifice, you're actually saving them eternally by killing them or committing violence now. And you're not a murderer, and you're not responsible for the violence if you're doing it in the name of the Lord. And it's just
so wild.
Yeah.
You know what they should have named it, though? They should have named it like, I don't know. Like something to do with like the Laban atonement. Like to tie that into the Book of Mormon, because that was the whole justification for Nephi killing Laban to get the plate.
Yes.
They should have called it something like that.
Yeah, they honestly should have. You think Brigham Young would have connected the dots with, because he was such a big, like, I need to justify what I'm doing. Right. But yeah, no, I don't think we'll get into the speeches that were given and the instances. A lot of it, we'll get into like the rumors and what was actually done and the murders and the almost murders and the documents and the rhetoric and then what kind of came of it. So that's what we're going to get into next episode, and we will discuss all of that then. It's going to be pretty crazy.
That sounds very intense. I cannot wait.
Yes, perfect for Halloween time. Spooky season.
Blood atonement definitely sounds spooky.